Picture this. A conference room. 10 people around a table. There's a problem that needs solving. A decision that needs to be made. 9 people are talking. Ideas fly back and forth. Voices overlap. Some people are louder than others. Some repeat themselves to make sure they're heard. The energy is high, chaotic, almost frantic. And then there's the 10th person. They haven't said a word. They're sitting back, not slouched, not disengaged, just still. Their eyes move from speaker to speaker. They're listening, but not performing listening. They're not nodding enthusiastically or leaning forward to signal agreement. They're just present, calm, watching. The conversation continues. People start repeating the same points. The noise increases, but the clarity doesn't. And then, at a certain moment, the 10th person leans forward slightly. They don't raise their hand. They don't clear their throat dramatically. They just shift their posture. And somehow, without trying, the room notices. The talking slows. People glance over. And when this person finally speaks, it's not loud. It's not long. Maybe it's one sentence. Maybe it's a question. But the entire energy in the room shifts. What they said wasn't revolutionary. But the fact that they waited, that they didn't need to fill the silence, that they only spoke when they had something worth saying, made their words land differently. That's not charisma in the traditional sense. That's not extroversion. That's something else entirely. It's command, and it doesn't come from volume. It comes from restraint. You've seen this before. Maybe it was a teacher who never raised their voice, but when they got quiet, the class went silent. Maybe it was a boss who didn't need to dominate meetings, but somehow everyone deferred to them anyway. Maybe it was someone in your family, the person who rarely spoke, but when they did, everyone listened. These people understand something most of us miss. In a world that worships noise, silence is power. In a culture that rewards constant self-promotion, restraint is magnetic. And in rooms full of people desperate to be heard, the person who doesn't need to prove anything stands out like a lighthouse in fog. Most people think power comes from talking more, from being the loudest voice, from making sure everyone knows what you think. But that's not power. That's insecurity performing as confidence. Real power doesn't need to announce itself. It just is. And the people who have it know that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. This isn't about being shy. It's not about social anxiety or fear of speaking. It's about understanding the psychology of influence at a level most people never reach. It's about recognizing that attention is currency, and the less you spend it, the more it's worth. Over 500 years ago, Niccolo Machiavelli understood this. He watched the power games of princes, politicians, and leaders. He saw who rose and who fell, and he noticed a pattern. The ones who talked the most weren't the ones who lasted. The ones who moved carefully, who observed before acting, who understood timing and perception. Those were the ones who survived and thrived. Machiavelli gets a bad reputation. People think he was teaching manipulation and cruelty. But if you actually read him, what he was teaching was realism. He was teaching that power is about understanding human nature, about seeing the world as it is, not as you wish it were. And one of the deepest truths he understood was this: people respect what they have to work for. When you give your attention too freely, when you speak without purpose, when you're always available, always explaining, always defending, you train people to devalue you. But when you speak less, when you hold back, when people have to wait for your input, something shifts. Your words carry weight. Your presence becomes magnetic. You stop chasing respect and start commanding it. So if you've ever felt out of place in loud rooms, if you've ever been told you're too quiet, if you've ever watched someone dominate a conversation and thought, that's not power, that's just noise, you were right. You saw through the performance. And now, we're going to break down exactly why silence, used strategically, is one of the most potent psychological tools you can wield. Niccolo Machiavelli lived in Renaissance Italy, a time of constant political chaos. City-states rose and fell. Alliances shifted overnight. Leaders were assassinated, exiled, or overthrown with brutal regularity. In that world, survival wasn't about being the nicest person. It was about understanding power. And Machiavelli was a student of power. His most famous work, The Prince, is often misread as a manual for tyrants. But what it actually is a brutally honest analysis of how influence really works. Machiavelli wasn't interested in how things should be. He was interested in how things are. And one of the core insights he offered was this: perception is reality. It doesn't matter what you are. It matters what people think you are. And here's where it connects to speech. Machiavelli understood that words are cheap. Everyone can talk. Everyone can make promises. Everyone can explain themselves. But the more you talk, the more you reveal. The more you reveal, the more predictable you become. And the more predictable you are, the less powerful you are. He wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." Think about that. Most people only interact with your surface. They don't know your thoughts, your struggles, your doubts. They only know what you show them. So the question becomes, what are you showing them? Are you showing them someone who needs validation? Someone who over-explains? Someone who fills every silence with words because they're uncomfortable with stillness? Or are you showing them someone who is comfortable in their own presence? Someone who doesn't need to convince anyone of anything? Someone whose silence suggests depth rather than emptiness? This is the paradox Machiavelli understood. The less you say, the more people assume you know. The less you react, the more people assume you're in control. The less available you make yourself, the more valuable your time becomes. It's counterintuitive, but it's deeply rooted in human psychology. We're wired to pay attention to scarcity. When something is abundant, we devalue it. When something is rare, we crave it. If someone is always talking, always available, always responding immediately, their words lose impact. But if someone speaks rarely, if they choose their moments carefully, if they let silence sit without rushing to fill it, their words become events. Machiavelli also understood timing. He knew that power wasn't just about what you did, but when you did it. A word spoken too early is wasted. A word spoken too late is irrelevant. But a word spoken at the exact right moment, after everyone else has exhausted themselves, lands with precision. This is why people who speak less often end up leading. Not because they're smarter, though they might be. Not because they're more confident, though they often appear that way. But because they understand the game. They know that in a room full of people competing for airtime, the one who doesn't compete wins by default. Here's another insight from Machiavelli that's deeply relevant. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. Now that sounds harsh, but what he meant was this: respect rooted in fear of consequences lasts longer than respect rooted in affection. People's feelings change, but their understanding of your boundaries doesn't. When you speak less, you create a boundary. You signal that your attention, your words, your energy are not given freely. People learn that if they want your input, they need to earn it. And that changes the entire dynamic. You're no longer chasing approval. You're no longer performing. You're simply being someone whose presence carries weight. Machiavelli wasn't teaching people to be cold or distant. He was teaching them to be strategic, to understand that influence is a game of perception, and the person who controls their image controls the room. The person who speaks less controls their image more effectively because they give people less material to misinterpret, less ammunition to use against them, and less reason to dismiss them. So when you see someone who commands respect through silence, they're not lucky. They're not naturally gifted with some magical aura. They've simply learned what Machiavelli knew. In a world of noise, silence is a weapon. And in a world of oversharing, mystery is magnetic. Let's get into the actual psychology of why this works. Because it's not magic, it's neuroscience and social dynamics. First, there's something called the cognitive fluency bias. Our brains prefer things that are easy to process. When someone talks a lot, when they over-explain, when they give you too much information, your brain has to work harder to sort through it all. And ironically, that effort makes you trust them less. You start wondering, why are they trying so hard to convince me? The excess feels like compensation for weakness. But when someone speaks concisely, when they say exactly what needs to be said and nothing more, your brain processes it smoothly. It feels true. It feels confident. This is why the most memorable lines in history are short. I have a dream. We shall fight on the beaches. Ask not what your country can do for you. These aren't paragraphs. They're precision strikes. Second, silence triggers something called the uncertainty principle in social psychology. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures. We want to predict behavior. When someone is quiet, when they don't immediately react, when they let moments breathe, we can't predict them as easily. And unpredictability in small doses creates fascination. Not fear, but intrigue. Think about it. The person who always has an opinion stops being interesting because you know what they're going to say. But the person who only speaks occasionally, you pay attention when they do because you don't know what's coming. Their silence makes their eventual words feel earned, significant. There's also the concept of psychological reactance. When people feel like you're trying too hard to influence them, they resist. But when you're not trying to influence them at all, when you're simply present without agenda, their defenses drop. This is why salespeople who talk less often close more deals. This is why leaders who don't dominate meetings often get more buy-in. The absence of pressure creates space for genuine engagement. Now let's talk about status signaling. In every social hierarchy, there are implicit rules about who speaks and when. Low-status individuals often feel the need to justify their presence through constant contribution. They talk to prove they belong. High-status individuals don't have that anxiety. They know they belong, so they can afford to be selective. When you speak less, you signal that you don't need external validation. You're not performing belonging. You're not auditioning for approval. You're simply existing in your own right. And people pick up on that. Subconsciously, they start treating you differently. They defer to you more. They value your input more. Not because of what you said, but because of what you didn't need to say. There's also a neurological component. When you speak constantly, you're operating in output mode. Your brain is focused on formulating, defending, explaining. You're not actually listening. You're waiting to talk. But when you speak less, you shift into observational mode. You notice things. You pick up on micro-expressions, tone shifts, group dynamics. You see the room more clearly than the people performing in it. This gives you a massive strategic advantage. You understand what's really happening while everyone else is too busy talking to notice. You see who the real decision maker is. You see where the tension is. You see the unspoken hierarchies. And when you finally do speak, you can address what actually matters instead of what people are pretending matters. Then there's the power of the pause. Studies show that people who pause before responding are perceived as more thoughtful, more credible, more trustworthy. The pause signals that you're actually considering the question instead of just reacting. It shows restraint. It shows you're not desperate to fill silence. Most people are terrified of silence. They experience it as awkward, as something that needs to be fixed immediately. But people who command respect have made peace with silence. They understand that silence isn't empty. It's full. It's where thinking happens. It's where presence lives. And when you're comfortable with it, others become comfortable with you holding it. Here's the key distinction, though. There's a difference between strategic silence and avoidant silence. Strategic silence is active. You're choosing not to speak because you're observing, processing, waiting for the right moment. Avoidant silence is passive. You're not speaking because you're afraid, insecure, or disengaged. People can feel the difference. Strategic silence feels grounded. It has weight. Avoidant silence feels withdrawn. It creates distance. One commands respect. The other invites dismissal. The difference isn't in the silence itself. It's in the energy behind it. Are you quiet because you're weak or because you're strong? The answer lives in your presence, not your words. Silence only works if your body speaks clearly, because humans don't just listen to words. We listen to everything. Posture, eye contact, facial expressions, micro movements. And if your silence is paired with weak body language, it reads as insecurity, not power. Let's start with posture. People who command respect through silence don't slouch. They don't fidget. They don't make themselves small. They take up space, not aggressively but comfortably. Their shoulders are back. Their spine is straight. They sit or stand like they have every right to be exactly where they are. This isn't arrogance. It's self-possession. Research shows that posture affects not just how others see you, but how you see yourself. When you sit up straight, your cortisol drops and your testosterone rises. You literally feel more confident. And that internal shift radiates outward. People sense it even if they can't articulate why. Then there's eye contact. This is where most people fail. They either avoid eye contact entirely, which signals insecurity, or they overdo it, which feels aggressive. People who command respect have calibrated eye contact. They hold it long enough to create connection but break it naturally. They're not staring you down. They're simply present with you. And here's the subtle part. They don't look away downward. Downward breaks signal submission. They look away horizontally or slightly upward, which maintains status while staying relaxed. These are micro adjustments, but they compound into a completely different presence. Stillness is another element. Watch someone who commands a room. They don't have nervous energy. They're not tapping their foot, playing with their pen, checking their phone. They're still. Not frozen, but grounded. Stillness signals that you're not anxious, not reactive, not desperate for stimulation. It signals control. Contrast that with someone who can't sit still, who shifts constantly, who needs to do something with their hands. That energy reads as discomfort, and discomfort is contagious. If you're uncomfortable in your own skin, people feel uncomfortable around you. Then there's facial expression. People who speak less often have neutral, resting faces. Not angry, not happy, just neutral. This is powerful because it's unreadable. When your face is a blank canvas, people project onto it. They assume you're thinking deeply. They assume you're confident. They assume you know something they don't. But if your face is overly expressive, if you're constantly smiling to seem approachable or frowning to seem serious, you're giving too much away. You're performing. And performance, again, signals insecurity. Now let's talk about movement. People who command respect move with intention. When they stand, it's deliberate. When they sit, it's purposeful. They don't rush. They don't dart around nervously. Every movement has weight. This doesn't mean moving in slow motion. It means moving like someone who isn't being chased by their own anxiety. There's also proximity. People who understand power know how to use space. They don't invade it aggressively, but they also don't shrink from it. If they need to get closer to make a point, they do. If they need to step back to observe, they do. They're fluid, not rigid. They read the room and adjust without overthinking. And here's something most people miss: silence after someone speaks to you. When someone asks you a question or makes a statement, the instinct is to respond immediately. But people who command respect pause. They let the words land. They think before they respond. That pause does two things. It shows you're actually considering what was said, and it makes the other person slightly uncertain, which shifts the power dynamic in your favor. This is straight from Machiavelli's playbook. He understood that people respect what they can't fully control. When you respond immediately, you're controllable. You're predictable. But when you pause, when you don't give them the instant gratification of a response, you disrupt their expectations. And disruption creates respect. Now, all of this only works if it's congruent. If you're trying to fake confidence, people will sense it. If you're sitting up straight but your eyes are darting around nervously, the posture doesn't matter. The key is internal state. You have to actually feel grounded. You have to actually be comfortable with silence. And that comfort comes from repetition. The more you practice being still, the more natural it becomes. The more you practice pausing before responding, the less awkward it feels. The more you practice holding eye contact without flinching, the more powerful it gets. This isn't about becoming someone you're not. It's about removing the nervous habits that obscure who you actually are. Because here's the truth. Most people are more powerful than they appear, but they sabotage themselves with weak body language. Excessive talking and nervous energy. The person who speaks less and commands respect isn't special. They've just stopped getting in their own way. Not everyone who speaks less does it for the same reason. There are different types, different motivations, different expressions of this principle. Let's break them down. The observer. This is the person who learns by watching. They're quiet because they're gathering information. They're studying the room, the dynamics, the unspoken tensions. When they finally speak, it's informed. They've seen what others missed. They know who the real players are, who's pretending, who's uncertain. Their silence isn't passive. It's strategic intelligence gathering. These people often end up in positions of influence because they understand the landscape better than anyone else. The strategist. This person speaks less because they're playing a longer game. They're not interested in winning the conversation. They're interested in winning the outcome. So they don't waste energy on verbal sparring. They don't need to prove they're smart. They let others talk, reveal their positions, commit to stances, and then, when it matters, they make their move. Machiavelli would have loved these people. They understand that power is about patience and timing, not volume. The authority. This is the person who has earned their position through competence, results, or experience. They don't need to speak much because their track record speaks for them. When they do talk, people listen not because of charisma, but because of credibility. Their silence is the silence of someone who has nothing to prove. They've already proven it. This is the CEO who sits quietly in meetings while others debate, then makes the final call. This is the veteran who doesn't need to share war stories because everyone already knows. The philosopher. This person speaks less because they're thinking more. They're not interested in surface-level conversation. They want depth. So they wait for moments where depth is possible. The rest of the time, they observe, they reflect, they live inside their own thoughts. When they do engage, it's meaningful. It's the person at the party who says almost nothing for 2 hours, then has one conversation that changes someone's perspective. Their silence protects their energy for what actually matters. The intimidator. Now, this one can go either way. Some people are quiet because they know their presence alone is enough to create unease. This can be healthy, a teacher who doesn't need to yell because their stillness is more powerful. Or it can be toxic, someone who uses silence as a weapon to manipulate or control. The difference is intent. Healthy intimidation is about maintaining boundaries and standards. Toxic intimidation is about dominance and fear. Machiavelli would say both are effective, but only one is sustainable. The introvert with strategy. Not all quiet people are strategically quiet. Some are just introverted. But some introverts have learned to weaponize their natural tendency toward silence. They've realized that what they once saw as a weakness, being quieter than others, is actually a strength in the right context. They've stopped apologizing for it and started leveraging it. This is the introvert who becomes the most respected person in the room, not despite their quietness, but because of it. Here's what all of these types have in common. They've rejected the cultural narrative that loudness equals leadership. They've seen through the performance. They've recognized that most talking is just noise, and noise doesn't build anything. But here's the warning. Not everyone who is quiet commands respect. Some people are quiet because they're afraid, because they don't know what to say, because they're disengaged or depressed or simply not interested. That kind of silence doesn't create respect. It creates invisibility. The difference, once again, is presence. The person who commands respect is silent but engaged. Their eyes are active. Their posture is strong. They're clearly present, clearly listening, clearly processing. The person who doesn't command respect is silent and absent. They're checked out. They're hiding. They're hoping not to be noticed. So if you're naturally quiet, the question is, are you quiet with presence or quiet with absence? Are you observing or avoiding? Are you strategic or scared? Because the same behavior, silence, can communicate completely opposite things depending on what's behind it. The goal isn't to be quiet for the sake of being quiet. The goal is to be intentional, to speak when you have something worth saying and to stay silent when you don't, to let your presence do the work your words used to do, and to understand that in a world where everyone is shouting, the person who whispers or says nothing at all is the one people lean in to hear. So how do you actually apply this without becoming a manipulative Machiavellian villain? Because that's the fear, isn't it? That if you start using silence strategically, you'll turn into someone calculating, cold, untrustworthy. Here's the truth. Machiavelli gets a bad reputation because people confuse strategy with cruelty. But being strategic doesn't mean being cruel. It just means being intentional. It means understanding how influence works and using that understanding ethically. The key is purpose. Ask yourself, why do I want to command respect? Is it because I want to control people? Or is it because I want to be taken seriously so I can actually contribute something meaningful? Is it because I'm insecure and need validation? Or is it because I'm tired of being overlooked when I have something valuable to offer? If your motivation is rooted in service, in contribution, in wanting to lead well, then using silence strategically isn't manipulation. It's communication. You're simply learning to communicate more effectively by saying less. Here's how to start. Practice the pause. When someone asks you a question, don't answer immediately. Count to 3 in your head. Let the silence sit, then respond. It feels awkward at first, but that awkwardness is just unfamiliarity. Over time, the pause becomes natural, and your responses become sharper because you've given yourself time to think. Stop filling dead air. In conversations, in meetings, in social settings, resist the urge to talk just because no one else is. Let the silence exist. See what happens. Often, someone else will fill it, and when they do, you learn something about them. Or, the silence will create space for something deeper to emerge. Reduce your word count. If you normally explain something in 5 sentences, try doing it in 3, then 2, then 1. This isn't about being cryptic. It's about being clear. The more words you use, the more chances you have to dilute your point. Precision is power. Observe more than you perform. In your next meeting or social gathering, try this. Spend the first half just watching. Don't try to contribute, don't try to impress, just notice who's really leading, who's performing, who's insecure, who's confident, what's the energy. Once you've observed, then engage. But engage with awareness, not reactivity. Let your body speak first. Before you walk into a room, take a breath, stand up straight, relax your face, ground yourself. Your body will communicate confidence before you say a single word. And if your body is confident, your words will land with more weight even if there are fewer of them. Now, here's the ethical line. Using silence to create respect is fine. Using silence to manipulate or control is not. The difference is transparency. If you're being silent to gather information so you can make a better decision, that's strategy. If you're being silent to make someone uncomfortable so you can exploit their anxiety, that's manipulation. Machiavelli would say the ends justify the means, but you don't have to adopt that philosophy completely. You can take the useful parts, the understanding of perception, the value of restraint, the power of timing, and leave behind the ruthlessness. Because here's what Machiavelli didn't talk about enough. Sustainable power is rooted in trust. And trust comes from consistency, integrity, and genuine care. You can command respect through silence, but you keep respect through character. So yes, speak less. But when you do speak, make it count. Make it honest. Make it true. Don't use your words to manipulate. Use them to clarify, to contribute, to connect. And in the silence between your words, be someone worth paying attention to. Be someone who's actually thinking, actually present, actually grounded. If you apply this, you'll notice something. People will start listening to you differently. They'll stop interrupting you. They'll wait for your input. They'll value your time, not because you demanded it, but because you demonstrated it. You showed them, through your restraint, that your attention is valuable. And once they believe that, everything changes. In the end, the psychology of people who speak less and command respect isn't complicated. It's about understanding that influence is a currency, and like any currency, scarcity increases value. It's about recognizing that most people are so desperate to be heard that they've forgotten how to listen. And it's about choosing to be different. Not louder, quieter, not more, less. Machiavelli understood that power doesn't announce itself. It simply exists. And the people who have it don't need to prove it. They just need to embody it. So stop filling the silence. Stop over-explaining. Stop performing. Just be. Be present. Be grounded. Be intentional. And watch what happens when you let your presence do the talking. If this resonated, drop a comment. Let me know what you're going to stop saying. And if you want more breakdowns of the psychology behind influence, power, and human behavior, hit subscribe. Because there's a lot more where this came from.